Welcome, everyone. And please do name yourself in the chat and where you're tuning in from. We are recording. So, again, those who are joining late will be able to view the video after the conclusion of the town hall. But we're so glad that you're here. And we are going to start right on time in hopes that we are going to end on time as well. So, first of all, there's a lot happening right now, both in our locals and throughout our state, and certainly on the federal landscape. So we wanted to bring everyone together for the opportunity to get a better sense of what's happening, not just with our locals and our contracts and what we've learned and in our contract wins, but also learn more about the legislative priorities that we have and what we're doing at the State House. And then also hear from our friends at AFT National, who are going to give us a federal legislative update, the electoral landscape, also of what's happening, where we are in the courts. And then we're going to close with just a preview of a new workshop that we have available that helps us all to understand the threats that we're currently facing, but most importantly, what we can do about it together. So again, if you're just joining us, please do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and local. And we're going to get started right away and jump actually into the very first section of our program this evening with Brian LaPierre, who's our Director of Organization, who's going to be sharing some of the wins that we've had from our locals first. So welcome, Brian. Oh, one more thing, sorry, right before you get started, Brian. There is going to be an opportunity for Q&A. So if you do have questions, please do put them in the Q&A on the webinar, and then we will have breaks throughout the town hall for those who presented to be able to answer those questions. So please do put your questions in the Q&A. And Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, President Tang, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our town hall. Happy summer and happy end of the school year. Thank you for all you do. I did want to start out, as Jessica had mentioned, we have had a number of recent wins as of late, and this is only a partial list. We understand others have secured contracts earlier this school year, and we're so proud and happy that that has occurred. But just in the last 6 weeks or so, we have had much success in our locals, and that's thanks to a great part of our local leadership on the ground with our negotiating teams, our local president, our field staff, who a lot of them are on this call, and I want to thank them for their diligent work, along with our organizing staff. And they've been terrific and are also on the call. Just a few contracts, if you could go back, Ray, that I wanted to highlight. As you can see, our Chelmsford Library recently, our Greater Lawrence Tech Teachers Unit. These are all TAs and or ratifications that have happened. Most recently, Lynn Teachers Union, all three of their units ratified. Medway, similar. Neshoba Valley had 4 that reached TA just on Friday. So there's just a bunch of great news on the horizon, and we have to celebrate these wins. New Bedford Federation of Paras, our Norfolk Aggie Support Staff Group, Pilgrim Collaborative, Shore Collaborative, South Shore Educational Collaborative, and a number of MLSA, which stands for the Massachusetts Library Staff Association, ratified as well. And Franklin and Holbrook and Linfield passed an override to fund their contract. North Reading and same with Winthrop passing an override to fully fund their contracts. So this is just the beginning. We're anticipating great news to come out of places like Lawrence and Fall River and Peabody and Chelmsford as well throughout the summer months and into the fall. But I just wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to make sure that we're recognizing all these great wins that our staff and our leaders around the state are engaged in. And all of them have the same common theme. And that theme is simple: solidarity, collective action, and contract campaigns result in stronger, better wages and contracts and working conditions for our members. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Brian. And if you have, again, any questions about contract negotiations and collective bargaining. We have an incredible staff at AFT Mass. If you go to the next slide, and you can contact any of them or reach out to Brian as well. And we also have an organizing team that supports our locals, whether or not you're in contract negotiations. Maybe it's an override fight or some other policy or advocacy initiative. Our organizers are also available to support you and your locals. And you can, your obviously your local leaders know how to contact them, but you can always reach out to the AFT Mass office as well. All right, thanks so much, Brian. And next up on our agenda is Sarah Wilfred. She's going to be sharing some of our legislative updates and what we've been up to at the State House and how you can get involved in the local legislative fights as well.
Thanks, Jessica. Good evening. My name is Sarah Wolford. As Jessica mentioned, I'm the Director of Policy at AFT Mass, and I'm here to share a legislative update, including our legislative priorities. So at our May e-board meeting, members met to review and decide on the legislative agenda for this coming year. All legislation, those we have filed and endorsed, are located on our website at aftma.org. At our June e-board meeting, members met to decide on legislative priorities for the year. After a brief review of our legislation and a send out of a survey, e-board members voted to prioritize the bills you see before you. R+, the first bill listed, has been and continues to be a strong priority for AFT Mass in fighting for the retirement rights of teachers. Every teacher should have the right to retire with dignity after a hardworking career in public service. We continue to advocate and lobby for this right and the responsibility of the legislator to live up to this promise after a clerical and administrative error with some educators in the wrong retirement category. 219 local presidents between the AFT and MTA have signed on to a letter sent to the House and Senate leadership, as well as members of the conference committee today, that underscores the importance of this for our members and constituents alike. Of those 219 locals, 36 districts represent conference committee members. If you or your local have not signed on to this important piece of legislation, it's not too late. Reach out today and let us know. We continue to fight for educator minimum wage and pay and paid family medical leave for educators. Educator minimum wage and pay, a bill that requires a $55,000 minimum pay for all paras and a $70,000 minimum pay for all teachers in the Commonwealth, that would increase to $60,000 and $80,000 in the year 2030. Our educators deserve a living wage. It is incomprehensible that teachers and paras must work 2 or 3 different jobs just to make rent or the exorbitant cost of living in the state. Our school buildings are crumbling and in need of desperate repair, and we are excited to endorse and prioritize S318 H526, a bill modernizing school construction because every student deserves to have an education in state-of-the-art buildings that encourage learning and not stifle it. Modern and environmentally friendly infrastructure is not only a critical piece of one's learning, it is also a critical piece of one's well-being. Many of these older buildings pose health risks as well. We want to continue advocating for a just and equitable way to monitor school improvement and accountability. For way too long, a punitive approach has dictated which schools come out on top and which fall to the bottom. Our Thrive 2.0 bill and the legislation we have pushed around community schools strives to reimagine the current system and replace it with one that is truly supportive of our most in-need schools and school communities. Lastly, we continue to fight to restore collective bargaining for all teachers and other school employees. For when we fight together, we win. In addition to the bills listed here, we are also supporting a number of bills related to and in the higher education space, including an act relative to debt-free higher education and an act relative to the rights of faculty members at UMass. We testified at a recent Higher Ed Joint Committee meeting in favor of the governor's Bright Bill, a historic higher education bill that would support a $2.5 billion investment, providing state universities and community and providing necessary capital improvements for the UMass system, state universities, and community colleges. Much of this infrastructure was built more than 50 years ago. And as mentioned before, without modern facilities, the learning experience is stifled for many students, and the needs of an ever-changing global workforce go unmet. All the bills mentioned have been filed. All the bills we have endorsed and prioritized have been filed, and we are awaiting hearing dates. We are awaiting hearing dates from the legislator for elected officials to learn more about each of them. Join us today and in the coming days as we fight for legislation that uplifts our educators and communities. Our AFT Mass Lobby Day is on June 25th. We hope to see you there and at other events to come. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And on the next slide, we have the, oops. On the next slide, we actually have the details for our AFT Mass Lobby Day, and thanks, Sarah. We'd love to see you there. It's actually something new that we're doing that we haven't done before or in a very long time, which is to bring together our members from across the state to lobby for a lot of the bills that you just heard about, but also I think it's really important that our state representatives hear directly from our constituents who are impacted and your personal stories about why you care about these bills and why we need to enact them. So again, please do join us on June 25th at the State House from 9:30 a.m. to 12 o'clock p.m. Even if you can't make it that whole time, we'd just love to see you there. And you can visit as many legislators as you can, but certainly starting with your own. So you can scan the QR code right here to RSVP and bring a friend or a colleague. We again know that our power is in our collective efforts and our collective advocacy and organizing. And so we need you there on June 25th to get those bills passed. All right, again, if you're just joining us, please do introduce yourself in the chat. And then if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will be coming back to those Q&A questions. But before we do that, next up, we have Tora Cohen from AFT, who's going to be sharing a bit about the legislative landscape federally. So Tora, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for the opportunity to update everybody on the latest on what's going on here in DC. You can go to the first slide. So we have been kind of immersed in this whole budget reconciliation process, which most people really don't ever get to see in their lifetime, but we've gotten to see it a lot in the past decade. And that's primarily because when either party's gotten in and gotten the trifecta, they have decided it's in their own interest on a lot of different levels to plow ahead using reconciliation to make some pretty major changes, because it's a process that essentially allows you to avoid the whole 60 vote threshold, which is always the death knell for legislation, because the Senate being at 53-47, it's really hard to get 60 votes for anything. So reconciliation limits the kinds of things they can do, but it allows them to go in a party line fashion to make some pretty dramatic changes. You will remember back when Joe Biden got elected, Build Back Better was the overall agenda plan they were trying to push. They didn't get as far as they wanted the first year, had to put it aside and come back to it the following August, but they were able to get it done under reconciliation. And the Republicans are merely kind of carrying out the same tradition. The House has now passed their reconciliation bill, and we are now waiting for the Senate to take action. The expectation is that they will, you can go to the next slide. Expectation is they will move next week. What we're hearing is the 25th, which I think is a week from Wednesday. Congress is scheduled to go out for July 4th recess at the end of next week. It's no secret that the president has said that he wants his big, beautiful bill signed into law by then. They've got a lot of work to do if they're going to make that happen. I think if you look at this slide, you can see kind of the major changes where they've kind of are making some big dents. We're all kind of waiting to see. We expect the Senate to moderate a little bit what the House did, but we don't know anything until we see language. They just released, the Senate Finance Committee just released language within the past hour. That's going to give us some important clues. Where are the tax benefits going to? Are they inuring to the wealthiest 1%? That's what we expect. That's kind of what we think we're going to see, but we'll have to wait and see the details. For those of you watching the state and local tax SALT deduction, That's a big item that they're going to have to deal with. The House passed something in their bill that the Senate is now trying to scale back because it costs a lot of money to fix salt. The issue they're running into is that they're trying to pare it back. And as they do that, it makes it harder for the moderate Republicans, those that are left of them in the House, to support the final bill because they've really kind of staked one of their big issues is making sure that the salt's reinstated and people can take that deduction. So they've got some pretty big things they need to reconcile. That's one. How much are they going to cut from Medicaid? Everybody's seen the president say, this bill's not going to cut Medicaid. BS. We all know it's going to. It's a question of how much. The thought was that they would moderate in the sense that they would reduce the total that they were going to do on Medicaid because a number of people in the House, those moderates we were just talking about, weren't comfortable with the $800 billion figure that came out of the House. But on the other hand, they've got problems in their caucus. They have a lot of MAGA types that don't think the bill cuts enough and they want more. So how they're able to balance that, that's going to be really up to them. There's also money in this. We anticipate the stuff that was in the Inflation Reduction Act that did pass in the second year of Biden's administration, the clean energy tax credits. A lot of those I think are going to be attacked to save money to use for other things. Pretty big food assistance cuts expected under the SNAP program. House was $300 billion. It's probably not going to be too far off of that. And there's going to be a lot of money in this bill for immigration enforcement. That's not a secret. We know the president wants to do much more here, and the things he wants to do are going to cost a lot of money. So they're putting forth some proposals in this bill as well. The kind of X factor in this whole thing is that the Republicans, because they didn't want to deal with the Democrats at all on this and wanted to do it party line, they have been doing their best not to bring the debt ceiling up. You all remember that debt ceiling is something that has to get extended, increased in order for us to pay our bills, to keep the economy going. Because the Republicans had to do it on their watch, they put it on reconciliation because they don't want to deal with the Democrats and give them any leverage at all. You remember earlier this year in March when they were trying to finish up the fiscal year 25 budget resolution, the thought was, well, the Dems are going to get some stuff done because they'll have leverage, they'll need Democratic votes. That didn't happen. All the Republicans in the House stuck together, and by them sticking together, they didn't need Democratic votes. So the leverage Dems thought they were going to have, they didn't get, and they're trying to do something in that fashion with this bill. And it's a hard because you have people like Rand Paul that said, hell no, I'm not going to support an increase in the debt limit. And a few others, like Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, have said we got to make more cuts. They can give up 3 votes in the Senate, and then they go to a tie with J.D. Vance breaking the tie. That's it. We're going to have to see in the final bill how many changes they've made. My expectation is they're not going to make a ton of changes. To get this back to the House, it's going to have to be, somewhat similar to what they did in the House, because it's hard to pass bill through the House. And if they make dramatic changes, they're just going to increase the degree of difficulty for themselves. You can go to the next slide. I think folks are, if we lose money in Medicaid, Medicaid pays for a whole bunch of stuff in schools. I think most of you are familiar with these functions. Go to the next one. One of the things the Republicans are trying to do that's controversial is layer on new work requirements. So if you're getting Medicaid, that you're actually holding down a job, that will make some conservatives happy because they think that there are too many people, you can look at some of the quotes, sitting on their grandmother's couch and playing video games and not working. The crazy conspiracy stuff that they believe in. Anyway, this is an area where we think they're going to put some stuff in. You can go to the next slide. Here's an estimate based on when the House passed their bill, the number of people that would lose Medicaid coverage. These are not small numbers. If you look in some of these Republican districts, what do you want to call them? The Biden districts, or ones that have been traditionally in the Democratic column, they're going to have problems with some of these folks. And I think that unless they can try to make the argument, which I think will be specious and false, that all they're doing is cutting fraud, waste, and abuse, and they're not going to cut services, they're pretty exposed on this. And they've made a decision that this is what they're going to do. I'd like to tell you that all the stuff we put out is making a difference. I don't think people are paying attention. It's enormously frustrating because I feel like we have the data and evidence that shows how much services are going to get cut and what exactly that means. It hasn't caught on. I have a feeling that if this bill passes, it will become much different. This stuff will start to kick in, and it'll be our job to connect the dots. I'd love to hear from you all what you guys think is going on. There's so much. They've flooded the zone in so many different ways that it's been really, really hard to get things to stick to them. And this is a good example. If you look at all the reams of data we've put out, other people put out, it's pretty clear there are going to be some pretty major cuts to Medicaid, where in some districts, 40, 50% of able-bodied adults, or just of adults receiving federal benefits, get Medicaid. And that's going to be a political problem for them. And we're going to make sure that they own this, because this is what they want. Go to the next one. Okay, that's the anticipated loss to the state of Massachusetts that I'm sure we put together. Sorry for my dog, who's Callie, come here. We don't need to bark. That's an estimate of what we lose under the House bill. Again, we'll have to see what the Senate bill does. I am going to put my number and all my comments different. Callie. Sorry, I'm getting my kids and my wife to call the puppy. Anyway, you guys are going to have a lot of questions. Please, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out either by phone, text me, email me. I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm happy to stay on here to answer questions as well. There's a lot going on. Ellie, can you get her? I'd like to give you my crystal ball estimation of what's going to happen next week. No one knows. I think they're going to have trouble getting this done by July 4th, because it's going to have to go back through the House. But I think we started to see, when the House moved this bill before Memorial Day, Trump leaned in hard and started to bully folks. And I expect that's kind of what he's going to do here. I think we're going to get a couple Republicans who oppose this, but getting north of 3 is going to be difficult. So let me stop there, and I'm happy to stay on. And Jessica, if there's something I didn't address you want to bring out, happy to do.
Sure. Well, we're going to pause right now anyway to take questions. And so if you have questions for anyone who's presented so far, whether it be Brian, Sarah, or Tor, now would be the time to put your questions in the Q&A so we can get those questions answered. But just to preview what's coming up next is we're going to hear from John Oates, who's Director of Political Mobilization at AFT, about the federal electoral landscape. But we wanted to make sure everyone knew about this reconciliation bill that's happening right now. Again, the Republicans don't want people to know what's in it. They purposely had this vote at 1 a.m. It passed by one vote. And there were some things that were even put in the bill that Republicans themselves didn't even realize was in the bill until after it was voted on. There wasn't enough time actually to have even the analysis usually of the costs of the bill, et cetera. And this doesn't actually save money. What it does is transfers money from people who rely on things like Medicaid and SNAP, et cetera, to a wealth tax cut. And so actually giving money to the billionaires. And there's some other pretty nefarious things in there as well. Tor, maybe you can just mention some of those other ones, for example, about not listening to the courts or AI regulation. But is a lot that in there that's very concerning, not just for our schools and our communities,
Yep,
but
yep.
also for democracy itself. And then,
So yeah,
um,
that's good.
and then there is a question. Why don't you start with that? And then there is a question that we can share in the chat too.
Sure. So there are a couple things I didn't mention. For instance, there is a tax credit for vouchers, which is going to help basically um, folks that have kids that are currently enrolled in private schools will get this benefit. It is, I think, $5 billion a year over the lifetime of the bill. It has not gotten the attention we wish it did. It is very similar to what Betsy DeVos proposed when the first Trump administration rolled through here. Couple other big things. There is on AI, they were seeking to restrict any state and local regulations. I do believe they've reached some sort of alternative on that, Jessica, and I got to find it. I don't know what the latest is. Um, there's also a question about, I'm not going to get into all these specifics, but because the rules of reconciliation are so like particular and Byzantine, if stuff doesn't have a impact on the deficit, um, you can't, it can get thrown out. You can raise a point of order. Now, the Republicans are going to try to protect as much stuff. You'll remember that when the Democrats were in charge, Bernie was trying to get the minimum wage increased. We were trying to get some of the changes in EFCA, possibly in reconciliation, some of the changes in the DREAM Act, proposed changes. The parliamentarians said all three of those would be out of order, and they weren't able to do those. One thing that if these guys are really going for it, which I don't anticipate they will do anything, but there's a good chance they're going to try to do things like, well, since we're already paying for the current baseline provides for these tax cuts, it's not really going to cost us any more money because we're already doing it and trying to establish that this stuff doesn't add to the deficit for a rhetorical talking point, even though it really does, is something they may try to do. Um, and I think that if they do take that approach, what they will do, so they're going to make the bill look like it doesn't cost as much, even though it does. What they would do is instead of getting the parliamentarian to rule on this, I think they'd have the chairman of the budget committee, our friend Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, make a determination. And then if the Democrats wanted to challenge that, the vote would be on overturning his decision, not the parliamentarian. So that's the kind of stuff that we need to keep an eye on, because if that's the approach they take, it's not going to be tethered to any sort of like honest objective or standard. It's going to be what they want to do politically. And I do anticipate they're going to make a run on trying not to make it look as expensive as it is. Um, there are a couple other areas where they may try to use or try to use the opinion of the chair of jurisdiction instead of going to the parliamentarian. Um, it's stuff we
Well,
keep our eye on. Go ahead.
that is very in the weeds.
I know it is.
But the good news is we have folks at AFT National who are keeping a very close eye on all of the details of what's happening in the federal government right now in regards to the reconciliation bill, but also and other bills as well. There was a quick question just about from Mickey from the United Teachers of Lowell, that if speech and language services are reimbursed by Medicaid as well as OT and PT, and yes, and in addition, it also provides medical transportation and provides funding for school nurses and such as well too. So there is definitely a lot at stake with the cuts to Medicaid. But thanks so much, Tor. And if you have additional questions, his information is going to be shared in the chat, but it's T Cohen, TCOWAN at AFT.org, and he's happy to follow up with any additional questions. But at this point, we're going to move on to the electoral landscape federally, and John Ost is going to be sharing a little bit about what's happening regarding elections.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Ray. So go ahead and go to the next one, first slide here. I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, look, 2024 presidential elections, those are all consuming, let there be no doubt. But we're rolling now into the off years, 2025 and 2026. And from a national standpoint, in terms of the AFT, the off-year elections are much more extensive involvement. You know, presidential, you kind of focus in on your 10 states or so to try to swing it. There are 38 gubernatorial elections between now and November of 26, which we all know has tremendous amount of impact on the states and on the AFT and our membership. But I want to talk a little bit about kind of what the landscape is right now and what we expect to occur. Now, right now, Trump's approval ratings, depending which polls you look at, is anywhere from high 30s to the upper 40s, but an average of all the polls basically has him at 45% to 50.8%. This is essentially where he kind of always is. Um, Democrats despise him. Republicans love them. Independents are where the game is really played. And independents right now have high disapproval of Trump. I think basically his approvals are sitting around 41% amongst independents, and that's important when you go into the election because 25 and 26, what it essentially is a referendum on the White House. And so I want to show this to make sure folks are aware, which is good news that he's underwater, but please, next slide. Um, so going into this election, I'm sorry, maybe I missed the order up here, but as I said, there are 38 gubernatorial elections between now and in 2026. We have two in 2025 that are of utmost importance that people are going to be paying attention to. You got Virginia, where it's an open seat. Virginia can only serve one term. Glenn Youngkin, who has basically been an acolyte for Trump, and his lieutenant governor, his name escapes me right now, will be the Republican nominee, and she'll be running against Abigail Spanberger, a Democrat. Um, Given Trump's policies and attacks on the federal workforce, I think folks are feeling pretty good about this race, and hopefully we'll pick up some legislative seats as well. New Jersey, however, is one that we're really concerned about. It is a blue state in theory, although it has been moving rightward in the last several elections. Democratic candidate Mikey Sherrill, Congresswoman, just won the primary last week. Is running against Jack Citarelli, I believe is his name, who is basically ordained by Trump. And so that is going to be a huge fight. And you can guarantee there are going to be a lot of cultural war issues there. And there'll be efforts to put a wedge between working class Democrats and uh, and uh, and the Democratic Party. Then you have the other 36 races. You can see most of them are solidly in either a Democrat or Republican column, but some big ones that we have to be watching, including Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, New York, Georgia. It's just a broad battlefield there that we're going to be focusing on. Can you go to the next slide, please? And then you look at the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate is very uphill for the Democratic Party. There just aren't that many pickup opportunities. We're down 3 seats. We need to net 3 in order to take control. And as you see here, Democrats actually have to protect 4 held seats in Minnesota, New Hampshire, in Georgia, and Michigan, whereas the Republicans really only have 2 vulnerable ones in Maine and in North Carolina. Go to the next slide, please. here's the real where the rubber meets the road. If we do not take the Senate, which good chance we will not, we must take control of the U.S. House. Otherwise, Donald Trump will be unbridled for another 2 years or longer. So we have to pick up a net 3 seats. And as you see here, Democrats actually have to protect 22 seats. Republicans only have to protect 18. Um, these are across the country. Now, AFT, we've done some research here. If we expand the Republican map a little bit, Democrat or AFT has 18 districts with at least 1,000 members in potentially vulnerable Republican districts. And so we are going to be running a program in there on accountability and getting to these folks, including we're going to start doing some town halls in these states, in these districts over the summer and into the fall, and to build a broader campaign. And Madeline will talk a little bit about that in a second here, or at least about our accountability effort coming up. Can you go on to the next slide, please? And so here, the early signs, though, are pretty good. If you look at the generic congressional race or vote, Democrats are about 2 or 3 points ahead of the Republican Party. Realistically, we probably need to be about 5 points ahead to make a clear dent. Otherwise, it's going to be it's going to be very iffy. Should have one more slide on here. No, didn't have it. All right. Well, I thought I sent it in there. This is what I want to say. There are 13 congressional districts that are held by Democrats currently that Donald Trump won the electoral vote in, meaning these folks are running in potentially red districts and could be very vulnerable. Last time around, Democrats had like 13 districts that they had Republicans were holding that Biden had won, and we picked off most of those. This time they only have 3. So basically meaning we got the low-hanging fruit in 2024. We are going to have to claw to find these other 3 or 4 seats. And of those 3 Republicans that are in districts won by a Democrat, won by Kamala Harris, 2 of them we have tried repeatedly to try to get in the past. Brian Fitzpatrick in Pennsylvania and Don Bacon in Nebraska. Those are very difficult seats and probably aren't going to get those. So we have to find these other places where Republicans outperformed. And the fact of the matter is, where Donald Trump is so noxious to the voter that we can pick it up. So on that, Chris, can you just chime in really quickly about some of the opportunity here on the accountability piece?
Right, John. Thank you. So Chris Mattingly, AFT Political Department. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chor. We are always looking for ways to sort of, better engage our members virtually, whether it's around the reconciliation process that Tor just discussed, or in particular those critical governor's races that John talked about in Virginia and New Jersey this fall. So with that, next week, Monday, the 23rd of June, AFT Political Department is going to be holding an important activist check-in Zoom. So if you're all interested in participating virtually in some of the things that we're going to be engaged in this fall, as John discussed, I encourage you to check out this Zoom. I believe it's in the chat. You should find it there. Look, we want your support. We need your support. We win when we engage our members. So be an activist. Check out that Zoom. Learn how you can get involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John and Chris. Really appreciate that. And there is one quick question, although I'm not sure if it's more of a hypothetical one, but from Valerie Carlson, just wondering if and when we should talk about the potential end to the party system. And so I don't know if you want to comment on that, but certainly I think the current system has had plenty of people feeling like it's not working for them, and that is probably a longer conversation. And I don't know if that's something that's been discussed at all, John.
No, it has not been discussed, but yeah, there's incredibly high dissatisfaction with the system right now, the parties. Democrats and Republicans, or neither party is looked upon fondly, except by the members of that party, right? And unfortunately, look, the biggest thing we need to do is get Hakeem Jeffries elected speaker. The Democratic dissatisfaction with the party is only 52 or 53%. That has to improve. Um, and have to hit a stride. The Republican side, their approval of their own party is about 70%. So if that gap isn't closed or addressed, very big problem in terms of possibly of turnout. So that's just something that we really have to look at, and which becomes incumbent upon us to make the differences a little clearer and see if we can't break through some of this. And yes, we all agree that the Democratic Party has left something to be desired. But right now, it's a binary choice. We either have uh, Speaker Johnson and Donald Trump has a trifecta, or we get Hakeem Jeffries in there and it gives us a block on the federal side.
And in the meantime, it's incumbent upon us in the labor movement to build the vision for what both parties should be advocating for in terms of actually improving lives for everyday working people. And so that's what we will continue to do, is create our own vision of what we think everyone should be advocating for, and bills that reflect that value. All right, so next up, we will have a little bit more time for questions, hopefully, but do want to just give the quick court updates from Dan McNeil, who's the General Counsel of AFT.
Thanks, Jessica, and thank you for having me this evening. Let me see, can we go to the slides? All right, next slide. I'm going to give a pretty high level overview of the cases. So AFT has been very active with our labor partners, with our affiliates in terms of bringing cases. All told, AFT has been a plaintiff in 11 cases that have been filed. Currently, we're still active in 8 cases. And we've had a couple cases dismissed or resolved. Our affiliate, AUP, in addition to cases on which they're co-plaintiff, has 3 additional cases that they're a part of. And just this month, the Washington State Nurses Association filed as a plaintiff in a case against Health and Human Services. Next slide. So these are the different buckets that I put our cases in. We have our cases protecting and defending public education. This applies to, cases involving the Department of Ed. It includes higher ed cases as well. We have our cases challenging DOJ and the authority to access our data. We've been very active in this space, filing against different agencies that have allowed DOJ access. The third bucket is defending higher education, knowledge, and research. And these are primarily the higher ed cases and the cases against the universities where we have members or an interest. And then protecting vital public services. So these may not, this would include all of our cases, obviously, public education, higher education. But we filed in cases to protect the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, which is a tiny agency, but it's super important and helps in contract negotiations or mediation of labor disputes. We also filed a case regarding the dismantling of NIOSH, which is an extremely important agency that provides data and does research on worker protections and safety. And also like HHS filing suit to protect the data that's been removed from various websites. So now we'll go into some of the specific cases. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. This is good right here. So 2 of our most important cases are those cases to protect the Department of Education. Randy calls the first case, the one challenging the Dear Colleague letter, our most important case. And the reason she calls it that is because this gave teachers and professors the freedom to continue to teach honest history and to not be afraid that their districts were going to be punished or that they would they would lose federal funding if they continued to teach diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this case was filed in the District of Maryland, along with AFT Maryland and other organizations. And this is challenging that Dear Colleague letter that went out, and then the subsequent certifications that were sent to state and local education agencies to certify that they had eliminated all illegal DEI programs without illegal DEI being identified or defined in any way that is consistent with the law. That case is that we got a preliminary injunction, and the education department did not challenge it. And so it has now moved to summary judgment. So we have filed briefs advocating that there are no questions of material fact in dispute. And we just filed last week, Thursday, our motion for summary judgment. And now the administration will now have its chance to file its response. The second big case in this area is in defending public education is the case in which AFT Massachusetts is also a plaintiff. So it's AFT, AFT Mass, AAUP, the Somerville Public Schools. And this challenges the dismantling of the Department of Ed, which they have tried to do through executive order by ordering that Pell Grants be moved to the Treasury and that CTE be moved to the Department of Labor. But also through the agency's actions itself by having a mass reduction in force and laying off 1,900 of the 4,000 employees of the department. These are people with technical expertise. These are the people that investigate through the Office of Civil Rights violations of the IDEA. These are the folks that administer the federal student aid programs. All the important people at the department who level up public education. So where there are gaps that states can't necessarily fill, the department does that. And when they rift those people, we called that an effective shutting down of the department. Now that case, we got a preliminary injunction at the district court. It was then appealed to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. And in that case, the appeals court upheld the preliminary injunction. So now the defendants have moved for a stay of the preliminary injunction, which would allow them to take these efforts to dismantle the Department of Ed while the case is proceeding on the merits. And they've taken that up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And just last week on Friday, AFT and the other plaintiffs in this case filed our response to the petition to the Supreme Court that is proceeding on their emergency docket. And so we will keep you updated on that. It's very important. This is a real challenge of the administration's authority and is a real test of the separation of powers. Next slide. As I mentioned, we've challenged our access to DOJ. So we've had cases challenging access to the financial student aid records at education, to Medicare and Medicaid filers at the Department of Labor, and also all of our members and retirees who have ever worked a day in their life or who are retired and receiving Social Security. And each of these cases is at various stages. We've gotten preliminary injunctions in some cases. We've had them upheld at the appellate court level. But as you may have heard just in the last week or so, the Supreme Court on its emergency docket stayed our preliminary injunction in the Social Security Administration case and is now allowing DOJ to access Social Security records. That case, all of these cases are proceeding on the merits, but we have been able to slow down DOJ's efforts. Unfortunately, now in each one of these cases, DOJ has access to those records while the cases proceed. Next slide. I have an update as of today. So we have filed cases to protect our grants that are made to our universities and institutions that are used to fund cancer research, other types of education research. Um, and, this is all being done under the guise of DEI or anti-Semitism. So Columbia University is the second bulleted case on this in this slide. Harvard faculty case is obviously challenging the cuts to Harvard. Um, Both of these cases were filed before any of the universities even tried to stop these actions by the administration. So I really want to give us credit for being plaintiffs on these cases. AFT is plaintiff on both of those university cases, Columbia and Harvard. And just today, the district court in the Columbia case uh, ruled against the AAUP and AFT and dismissed the case, saying that we didn't have standing. And it's a Trump appointee in the Southern District, and the decision is extremely hostile, and we feel biased. They went so far as to question whether or not AFT's 1.8 members really authorized the AFT to hire a cadre of lawyers to challenge these cuts to Columbia University, and whether or not we had a sincere interest in on behalf of all of our members. So Randy has given us the go-ahead to appeal in that case. On the first case, I want to mention this one was settled within days of us filing. This is when the Department of Ed shut down access to the income-driven repayment systems for federal student aid. And we filed suit, and within days, we were able to reach a settlement and agreement with the Department of Ed to restore those programs. So that's one of the cases I noted that has been resolved already. Um, and, and, uh, and we feel that we got a good outcome in that case. And then finally, the last slide. These are the cases that I mentioned to protect public services. So we're a plaintiff in this case against the FMCS for laying off. They fired over 140 mediators and handed them their walking papers, and they kept only 4 mediators on for the entire country. And so in that case, the attorneys general also sued. And they got a preliminary injunction in their case, which saw those mediators reinstated. And then the other case, National Nurses United, AFT is a plaintiff in this against RFK Jr. and HHS for dismantling and getting rid of all the data and the staff that worked for NIOSH. The WSNA case also falls into this bucket where the data was removed from the website for HHS, various health studies and data that was there. So those are the cases seeking to protect public services. These might be tiny agencies, or the number of people may have been in these sub agencies may have been small, but the work that they do is vitally important to the work of AFT and is used by us in these various cases. So that's an update on the legal front. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take it. I know that's a pretty high level view, but we provide regular updates to AFT leaders, and I'm sure you'll invite me back for a further meeting.
Thanks so much, Dan. Really appreciate your support. And we were proud to be a part of one of those cases and get regular updates actually from some of the federal workers who were impacted. And they were told that they were supposed to be rehired. And so they've been getting some communications about getting rehired, but it might just be that they're doing that because they have to right now, but not because they actually are going to rehire those federal workers. Regardless, we need to challenge it because we don't think it was lawfully done. And there are many students now who are not getting the services they need or the supports they need, or in the Office of Civil Rights, the attention they need if they're being discriminated against. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and thank you, Jessica, to you and your staff who helped make those declarations possible that got us these victories.
Well, we will definitely continue to fight, whether it's in the legislature, whether it's in the courts, but certainly also on the streets as well. So thank you again. And the last section is just, what does all this mean? Why is all of this happening? And it really does actually have to do with the authoritarianism that's creeping into our democracy. And so we wanted to make sure you all knew that there is a new curriculum and available, and actually there's a number of different workshops that are available from the AFT, and that we are happy to host for you at your locals or with community partners. And so the first one is just foundational to understanding the threat of autocracy and how to fight back. And so I'm going to walk us through some highlights from that presentation, but it's going to be available actually in a workshop in July on the 7th and 8th and 12th. And so we hope that some of you will be able to attend that and then also bring it back to your own locals. But there's a lot of other workshops available too, including, why we mobilize and how to be involved, what does it mean to be a good partner in building community coalitions, how do you safely hold rallies or marches and actions like that. So more to come, but just a quick, overview of the 90-minute introductory workshop. Again, I'm not doing the whole thing. I'm just going to share some highlights from it. So if you could go to the next slide, please. This is what's covered in this 90-minute workshop that, again, we hope that you'll be able to host at your own locals as well. But it covers understanding the threat, how mass mobilization, non-cooperation can beat authoritarianism, implementing mass mobilization. What does that even mean? Well, what you'll learn is it's a lot of what unions already do. And engaging in non-cooperation, whether it's boycotts and things like that, that we've already seen very effective, whether it was the Tesla takedowns or the Target boycotts, for example. And then some hope as well, because we need that in these really trying times. But the first part, if you look at the first slide, is just understanding what authoritarianism is in first place. And it, can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide. So it covers again just what is authoritarianism. It's a big word. It's actually kind of hard to say, but ultimately what it is an abuse of power, and it's concentration of power in a small group of people who then maintain their power through repression and threats or acts of violence or abuse of power. And so it goes over the definition of authoritarianism and then also the definition of democracy, because we have to remember what democracy is supposed to be too. So if you can go to the next slide. And again, we always have to remember democracy is supposed to be a government for the people, by the people, and we, the people, should be engaged, and our government should be working for the people, not a small group of people who are benefiting from everybody else. But the next slide is probably the most important one. We know that a lot of our members may not understand, what authoritarianism is in the first place, or actually may not agree that actually we're in trouble or that we're having democratic backsliding. And so we go over, well, what do authoritarians do? It comes from actually the authoritarian playbook. And we ask, have you seen direct investigations against critics? And folks may bring up what happened to the Wisconsin judge, Hannah Dugan, or what's happening right now with Senator Padilla and Gavin Newsom, or even our own Mayor Wu being investigated. But certainly Mayor Ross Baraka in New Jersey was also someone who, was a high-profile example of investigations. Second question is, well, have we seen given license to lawbreaking? Well, we know that there have been pardons to January 6th insurrectionists. We've seen ICE doing unlawful things. Regulatory retaliation is another example. And you can probably think of your own examples, but some that we've seen certainly are revoking grants that have already been dispersed, or repealing, taking away visas for Harvard international students and staff, threatening to take away nonprofit status of organizations that don't agree with the current administration. Deploying military domestically, we see what's happening in LA right now with the Marines and the National Guard being called in. And have we seen federal law enforcement overreach? Well, there's lots of examples in terms of deporting or arresting citizens, or immigrants with work authorizations, or renditions to El Salvador. And then the last one, the autocrat won't leave. Well, we have seen him say, that he is interested in the third term and he's serious about it. But certainly after he lost the election to Biden, the refusal to leave and try to invalidate the results are another example of that as well. And so we get deeper into what authoritarians do and examples that we've seen. Next slide, please. And then we get into mass mobilization and how non-cooperation can actually beat authoritarianism. So next slide. What we do know from the research on democratic backsliding is that unfortunately it's usually very lethal to democracy. And from 1900 to 2019, 68% of them broke down into authoritarian rule. In the last 30 years, it's been a little bit better. It's about 54% of those democracies that break down are able to U-turn and actually have a stronger, better democracy. And there, we know also from the research and examples in other countries and other places that civil resistance is key to winning back our democracy. But there's even greater hope. Next slide. Which is that when trade unions are involved in the resistance, actually that percentage goes all the way up to 83%. And that's why it's so important that our union and unions across the nation are a part of the democracy movement and fighting back authoritarianism. And you see the example from the Korean Teachers Union in the previous slide of they were able to be a leader in fighting back the coups in South Korea, and they were led by the KCTU, which is like the equivalent of the AFL-CIO in South Korea. And unions have a really important role to play because of the specific characteristics of unions. So in general, we have high levels of public trust, we have clear channels for coordinating actions, we have strong ties amongst our members, deep networks within our own local communities, we have an organized base with the capacity to mobilize, we have experienced leadership that has led work actions before, right? Because we're in contract negotiations and constantly having like little mini democracies actually within our unions. And we ultimately have capacity to exert economic leverage through non-cooperation. And so there's a lot more reasons why unions are uniquely positioned to support pro-democracy movements, but we definitely certainly have a responsibility in this moment right now in the US too. And next slide. So then we go over, who's involved and why. We talk about the aspiring authoritarian and what they're trying to accomplish, and then the team that we need to be working together in order to defeat the authoritarian and strengthen and bring back our democracy. Next slide. And our goal on Team Democracy is to slow down what's happening, to stop it, and ultimately reverse it. And it does take time, but we are in a critical moment right now where we can slow it and stop it, but not if we're not all engaged and all understanding the threat we're under and what to do about it. Next slide. And so that it goes over, the tools, what are they trying to do? Well, there's a reason why, they're going after immigrants and labor unions and higher ed. They're trying to divide us up and turn us against each other, pick off one member at a time, and sow confusion, distract, even provoke opposition violence. So it's really important that we remain nonviolent and peaceful in our fight back. But it's the workshop goes into what the tools are so that we can better understand next how we fight back with Team Democracy. And again, unions are important to this because we already understand the importance of collective action and working together, the idea of solidarity, and that an injury to one is injury to all. And so we have to use the tools that we have, whether they're legislative, electoral, organizing, and certainly even economic leverage. And so again, these are the things that we need to do in order to fight back authoritarianism and do it not just within labor, but across sectors and industries too. Next slide. This is an example of just the pillars of support. So the reality is authoritarians can't do what they do without all these pillars supporting them. And so our goal is to shift these pillars away from authoritarianism and back to supporting democracy. And we get into in this workshop what those pillars are and how we shift them. Next slide. But most importantly, we need to remember that while a traditional idea of power is that there's one person on the top and then the power goes down, actually, if it's the opposite, if the authoritarian doesn't have the support of those pillars, then they will topple. The last part of the workshop goes into implementing mass mobilization, resistance, and non-cooperation. Again, always peaceful, always nonviolent, and gives examples just from history. This is not new in the United States. Many groups have already faced oppression before historically, and those same tools can be used today. And those learnings from our past movements, whether they be civil rights movements or climate justice movements or indigenous rights movements, that help us to have the skills and tools for these for mobilization, resistance, and non-cooperation. Next slide, please. What we know is that ultimately, if we can get 3.5% of the population engaged in strategic escalation, that we can win. And on June 14th, we saw the estimates say around 5 to 6 million people engaged in the June 14th actions. So we are well on our way. That was an increase from the Hands Off rally on April 5th. And there's about 12 million people that would make 3.5% in the United States. And so we're getting there, but we got to keep building our movement. Next slide, please. And this is just a quick graph, actually, of the number of protests are significantly higher in 2025 than they were even in 2017. It's not always reflected in the media, but again, media is one of the pillars that we need to move as well. All right, next slide, please. These are just some examples of the way AFT has already been engaged in this work, whether it was the March 4th Protect Our Kids actions that we spearheaded and led, or April 5th Hands Off rallies, International Workers' Day, May Day. We had 3,000 people here just in Boston. And then, of course, June 14th is the most recent National Day of Action, but we're organizing towards another day of action, certainly on Labor Day. Next slide, please. So again, we can do this as oppressive and demoralizing a lot of what's happening is. We do believe that courage is contagious, and so we have to build the movement and show courage, and that others we know will join when they see all of us being courageous too. Next slide. Again, just a review of what they're trying to do and what we need to do in order to win back democracy and make it stronger and better and actually work for everybody, because we know it wasn't working for everybody in first place. Next. And then we get into, again, what we can do about it. So I do want to take a few minutes just to go over that. Next slide, please. So, like I shared, we are holding this workshop. Again, I just did a quick highlights and preview of the workshop, but it's it's going to be available on July 7th for our AFT members and staff, and on July 8th. It's one or the other. It's not both days. You can either come on July 7th. It's going to be at the Boston Teachers Union, or on July 8th. And then we're going to have another one open. Would love for you all to invite your community allies and partners, and that would be on July 12th. And if you would like to host one actually at your own local or union or CLC, or even if you are part of a faith-based group or a civic organization, or want to have a training at your church, we would love to be able to provide that as well. And we're working with a whole network of New England trainers who can provide these workshops and ones that are tailored to what your local needs may be too. And you just need to reach out. And we actually have a form you can fill out right now if you'd like to have a training at your local or with a community partner. But we invite all of you to attend on July 7th and 8th and 12th and experience it yourself, and then schedule one later in the summer if you'd like to. All right, next slide, please. And then we'll also be having a version of this at the AFT Mass BTU Summer Organizing Institute, which is in August on the 13th and 14th. But again, while we have them centralized in Boston right now, we want to be able to actually host them throughout the state. And so we'd love for you to reach out to us and let us know if we can come to your local. And it doesn't have to be in a union hall. It could, again, be with a community partner, or with a church partner, or a faith-based group, or a civic organization. We need to take this show on the road, and in order to mobilize and organize, certainly share the threats so that we have a shared common analysis of what's happening. And so we know not only the threats, but the solutions to meeting the moment. All right, I am going to pause there. I think there might be actually one more slide. But yep, there's a QR code for requesting a training. or workshop. And again, we have a 90-minute version, we have a 3-hour version, and then we have a longer version. And then there's also different workshops to support whether you want to plan a march or a rally or get a medic training. There's lots of ways that everyone can have a role in this movement right now. Okay, I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions. I don't see any questions. Well, we appreciate you all. Wait, nope, there might be one. Hold on. Oh, there's a question. How can we support things in a state we work in but don't live in? So I think there's a lot of ways actually. So one, we actually want to build this out as a New England network. And so if you do actually want to have any of these trainings, and it's not in Massachusetts, but in New Hampshire, Vermont, et cetera, we do have AFT locals in those places as well, and would support bringing any of these workshops to other states. But I think maybe actually, Heather, I just realized maybe you're talking about, the purple states or the red states. And there are definitely ways, I think, to support those places as well. We'll be setting up phone banking and door knocking opportunities when elections come. But I think it's actually just sharing the story and talking to your neighbors and listening to colleagues or friends who may live in those states and sharing information out. Part of the challenge right now is that authoritarians want people to be fearful and not to speak up. And then we have to be the ones who do need to speak up and share that what's happening is not right and not obey in advance, as Tim Snyder says, and that and also hear what people care about and build those relationships and connections, and then help to connect the dots between the bad policies that are harming the people who are most vulnerable and have the greatest needs. And there are definitely ways that we can do that, even if it's not in our direct state, and we can connect you to those opportunities too, especially over the summer. Heather, I hope that answered your question, but again, feel free to reach out if you have questions that come up after this town hall is over. We appreciate you all again joining us, and for those who asked for the slides, this is being recorded, and so we will be sharing out the recording, especially for those who weren't able to join us tonight, but wanted to get the information.
I'm also sharing a few more uh, ways you can plug in the chat. We've got the Summer Organizing Institute coming up, and there's also our activist list that you can stay updated. And I put that link in the chat as well.
Thanks, Jeremy. All right, seeing I think no other questions. We hope you all have a wonderful night and hope to see you soon at one of our upcoming workshops. And hopefully we'll see you in your own communities as well. And we'd be happy to join you there.